On this day in 1930, Mahatma Gandhi poured salt onto the slug that was the British Raj, and the colonialism that had lasted almost 100 years began dissolving into mush. Of all of the seasonings, I thought that paprika would have more of a revolutionary air to it, but no, salt was what freed India. Kind of. But how? Well, this is the story of the Indian salt marches. Now, Britain has got a long, proud history of screwing over India, and one of the things that we did was to tax salt to a point that the common person simply could not afford it. We have so much hidden salt in all of our foods now that it's very much become the villain of the piece, but we do actually need salt in our diet, and it's also used to preserve food, so it was really bad for people to not be able to eat it at all. And what made it worse was that it was actually really easy to make salt. You could argue there's barely any making required at all. Like, seawater would evaporate on the beaches and you would literally go and just pick up the salt that was left behind. Or at least you could do that if your country wasn't being occupied by the British, who would arrest you if you did it. So Gandhi saw this as an opportunity to get the average person involved in the fight against colonialism. This wasn't some complicated issue about legislation that you needed a degree to understand and a cartload of free time and fucks to give about it. This was about not being allowed to go to a beach, pick up some salt, and eat it. So on this day in 1930, Gandhi and 78 of his followers set out on the 240-mile march from his residence at Sabarmati Ashram to Dandi. This was in the state of Gujarat in northwest India, where a lot of salt was made. He'd written to the Viceroy of India to tell him that this was going on, and the Viceroy said that he wasn't worried. Bless him. Gandhi had also announced it in the newspaper, so journalists turned up to cover the event, and in a dramatic speech before setting out, he said, "We are entering upon a life and death struggle, a holy war. We are performing an all-embracing sacrifice." And to be fair, he was right. The British had got a track record of being heavy-handed in their approach to civil disobedience. So over the 24 days of the Salt March, Gandhi and his followers would stop in various villages and they would encourage people to not cooperate with the British salt tax. When they arrived at the village of Aslali on the first night, he drew a crowd of 4,000 people. That is basically the same as Brixton Academy standing capacity. The Statesman newspaper said that 100,000 people lined the streets to see them off on the journey. It was like the Tour de France, but on foot. And in India, it was nothing like the Tour de France. The march drew international newspaper coverage, and Gandhi was more than happy to give interviews to them. The New York Times reported on it pretty much every day. 30,000 people greeted the marchers at Surat. 50,000 people were there when they arrived in Dandi. He could have literally sold out Wembley. He was like Taylor Swift, and this was his era's tour. He had bad blood with the British, who knew all too well that he was fearless, and this was not a love story. He had a reputation, and this was about to be a cruel summer for the Brits. People joined the march, so there were about 2,000 people with him when they arrived at their final destination in Dandi. And on the 6th of April 1930, Gandhi led his followers in prayer on the beach, and raising a lump of salty mud in his hand, he declared, "With this I am shaking the foundations of the British Empire." He then boiled it in some water, making illegal salt. And the previously indifferent Viceroy, Lord Irwin, looked at this and he went, "Oh shit." The event was in all of the newspapers. It was all over the world. Millions began breaking the salt laws. Women, they were able to get involved with the activism, which Lord Irwin regarded as a new and serious feature. People began boycotting British goods. The British arrested 60,000 people in a month, including Gandhi himself, obviously. He wasn't released from prison until January 1931. Now, India wouldn't gain independence from Britain until the 15th of August 1947, but the Salt Marches, they showed the average person that they could do something to resist. So remember, no matter how small, do what you can to make a difference, especially when the man has got his boot on your neck. All of those little things, they add up to one big thing in the end. So thank you so much for watching. Why not subscribe? And I'll see you tomorrow.